Good morning. It's Thursday morning. Nice to be with you. You know, I usually start this by some kind of funny little thing like we're in our studio and wherever it is, and I thought of having a corporate sponsor that would elicit some giggles and some laughter, but I've been sobered up pretty much this week by reading the New York Times on Sunday. Simone Landon, the assistant editor of the graphics department, was in charge. The New York Times knew this thing was happening way back in late November, and they got their editorial staff ready to do a tribute if this got to be apocalyptic, the death toll. And so they were ready to roll on Sunday, the 24th, and it was sad to read 100,000 names in 3.5 pages of the New York Times, that in print so small that you couldn't read it without a magnifying glass. It was not just the name, it was the city, and then a phrase, 2-word phrase. John J. Porter, Atlanta, Georgia, teacher, something. Just a lovely, lovely thing. And it's 100,000 names. How do you measure that? Simone Landon did not want to do graphs. She does graphs, all the squiggle lines. People are tired of the graphs. We don't understand them. They're all multicolored. They go up and down. Numbers are very hard to read. How do you make it? How do you honor people who died? Because the tragedy is not in the numbers. The tragedy is in the human lives that have suffered and died. And the stories that of COVID, of the first responders and the people in the hospitals who are talking about the agony of people as they die. Families not being able to be there, talking on Skype, talking on FaceTime. Oh, just unbelievable. How do you measure 100,000 people? Well, I have a measurement. I had the great privilege of going last fall, a year ago last fall, to the Big House in Michigan, Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor, and that holds 107,000 people when Michigan plays football, and they can get 115,000 in there when Ohio State's there. And I looked around in my mind's eye and saw that stadium and know that many people have died in 10 weeks. In 10 weeks. And so probably not interested in joking around. Because the question is, how can we talk about happiness in the light of such grief? Well, if happiness is a feeling, you can't. If happiness is an emotion, you can't. Anybody who's happy is either apathetic or dumb, or maybe both. But happiness can be in your life because it's not an emotion. What is it? I used to try to teach the students this in the high school. Václav Havel, who was president of the Czech Republic. I almost said Czechoslovakia. Czech Republic. He was a dissident. He was a playwright and he was an author. He was opposed to the communist regime. He wrote about it. He was in prison, all of that. And when he was released, he was unanimously elected as president of the Czech Republic. And he wrote, "Hope is not the conviction that something will work out well. Hope is not a conviction that something will work out well." Do you think the Atlanta Hawks will sign LeBron James? Gee, I hope so. That's not hope. That's guessing. Hope is the conviction that something will turn out well. It is not optimism. Optimism is expecting something to turn out well. Hope, rather, is the certainty that no matter how dark it is today, I will act to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I'm happiest when I'm doing it. That's it. That's his definition of hope. I love it. And I would tell the students that, and they would memorize it. But of course, they didn't have dark times. Not really. Not yet. Not all of them. Not many of them. They're still young and in the bloom of life. But maybe when you're our age, or my age, you begin to understand his definition of Václav Havel. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that this action and my belief now in this time of darkness will be hopeful because it's the right thing to do. And I'm happiest when I'm doing it. When Emily Dickinson wrote her poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore could be the storm that could abash that little bird that keeps so many warm. Oh, I've heard it on the farthest land and on the chillest sea, but never in my extremity has hope asked a thing of me. And she wrote that in 1860, not sure, 62, 63. Many scholars think she wrote it as a result of the Battle of Gettysburg, when there was not one man over 15 and under 50 in Amherst, Massachusetts. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore could be the storm that could abash that little bird that keeps so many warm. Happiness has a lot of traps, and I guess one trap is the hunt for possessions. Again, I don't like to do this because I don't like to moralize about possessions. You know, I had a comfortable childhood. I had loving parents. When my mother died, my father remarried a beloved stepmother, and I had beautiful sisters who cared for me. One was 5 years older, one was 4 years older. And I was very deeply loved as a kid. And my father had a nice apartment. We owned it in New York, 2-level floors. And we had a little beach house in Lavallette, New Jersey. You know, a beach house. It was, by today's standards, oh my goodness, is it small. But it was our home, and we would leave school in June as kids got out in the Northeast, and we'd go right down and spend the whole summer down there. Come back after Labor Day. My father would be there at the weekends. He would come down on the train Friday night, and we'd go back Sunday night. Happiness can't be a feeling. If it's a feeling, then we can't talk about it, not at times like this. But it's not an emotion. Emotions are wonderful. Where would we be without them? But they are transitory. Grief, that's the good news. Thank God grief is a feeling. Thank God it doesn't last forever. Thank God sadness is a feeling. And often happiness can be what the English call a hold-all, a big bag you throw every positive feeling in, zip it up and say, now that's happiness. That's not it. Happiness is the conviction that even in these dark times, I'm doing the thing I ought to be doing because it's quite frankly the right thing to do. And I'm happiest when I'm doing it. I mean, they tell you, you know, it's funny, Mary has lost her business, you know. She comes downstairs from working hard upstairs, deleting all the trips and seeing all her commissions fly away. So what she does is she comes down and watches reality TV, and she's watching a show called Insane Pools. These are people who build swimming pools. So here's Mary having lost her business, and she's watching some guy build a swimming pool that cost $500,000. And Mary is able to live with great juxtaposition. Obviously, she does. She lives with a great deal of contradiction. So she watches Insane Pools on whatever channel that is. Two psychologists, Edward Dreider, D-I-E-N-E-R, Diner, sorry, and Ronald Engelhunt have done a study that wealthy people are not any happier than non-wealthy people. Now, we're not talking about the people who live on subsistence and who eke out a daily food, find it, eat every 2 days, and we're not talking. That's a misery that defies happiness. But the ordinary guy, the ordinary woman is not any less happier than the wealthy person, although people of average means always fantasize that wealthy people have happiness. The grass is always greener, the old English farm proverb, on the other side of the fence. The youth of wealthy people are at risk sometimes because choices are available to them. There are no more drugs in the poor community than there are in the wealthy community, no less drugs in the wealthy community than there are in the poor community. Pressure is pressure is pressure. And so, to be honest with you, Abraham Lincoln was right. Happiness is what you make it. Everyone is as happy as they want to be. We had wonderful friends. My sister, because she worked in New York with the mayors of New York, had a wonderful college roommate, Roberta. And she had a beautiful home in Upper Montclair, New Jersey. Gorgeous home, no children, loving husband. We'd go there on some weekends, and I tell you, we'd just have a ball. There was a maid, and there was a cook. And I'd get there Friday night and leave Sunday afternoon or Sunday night, and just have enjoyed myself completely and totally. And I don't know whether they were happy or not, but they sure made me happy. Happiness can be a hold-all in which we dump every positive thing. Clergy tend not to be too much into possession. We tend not to be greedy people. We understand that for most clergy, our salaries are on the level of teachers. There are some highly paid clergy, but for most part, we average out with a comfortable living, and we're blessed with a wonderful pension. So we have a retirement, and we're very fortunate. But status is something. Status is something that sometimes tempts us. Everybody wants to be a bishop. Well, I don't. To be honest with you, the greatest job in the church, the greatest job in the whole church, is to be the number 2 guy at Holy Innocents. And I was privileged to be the number 2 guy twice. With Bob Johnson and with David Galloway. I was the number 1 guy once, and it's much nicer to be the number 2 person because you can do all the work and all the live ammunition is firing above your head. Status is, of course, a wonderful thing to want. We're told if we want to be a bishop, it's a good thing, St. Paul said. Who desires to be a bishop desires a good thing. But status is responsibility, of course, and responsibility is burden. And if it's a burden, then it's a duty, an office. It does relate to us. Jesus did say about the banquet scene, where you would jostle for positions, and everyone wanted to be up near the top, and he would say how embarrassing it is for the host to say to this person, go down lower, and how wonderful it is for the guy low or the woman low to come up high. I think one of the problems with searching for status is that when you don't get it, you can become lack of confidence and doubt your self-importance. Everybody wants to be a bishop. I worked with a bishop. I worked with Bennett Jones Sims. I was canon to the bishop, and I was his companion. We would leave the office often, late afternoon, drive to Columbus, drive to Macon, drive to LaGrange, go up north to Clayton, and do confirmations. And I would sit in the congregation, and on the way home, we talk. He was the bishop who established this diocese. Oh, he established it. Bennett Jones Sims. He was a teacher from Virginia Seminary, a very fine rector of the Church of the Redeemer in Baltimore, Maryland. And he wanted to be a bishop. He did. He told me many times he wanted to be a bishop because he wanted to make an impact. And I remember we were having a collegium, a seminar, and two priests from Atlanta were in Washington when the election for that bishop was held in Atlanta. And I remember the phone call. And Ed Tate was the rector of St. Luke's, and he picked up the phone and he went, And we all went down to Bennett's office and sang the doxology. And he wept. And he established many things in this diocese. He was on the front line. He had to introduce a new prayer book after 50 years of the other one, 1928. And the new prayer was in paperback. He had to introduce women's ordination. Now, common things. Authorized services all over the place. But in those days, none of it. It was anger and frustration that came. And it overtook him. It overtook him. Then came the homosexual issue. And then the rising divorce rate in clergy. And it overwhelmed him. And my mother used to say, be careful what you ask for. St. Teresa of Avila, the great mystic in Spain, said more tears are shed over answered prayers than over unanswered ones. So, happiness is not a feeling. It is not an emotion. As powerful as those are transitory. They just pass through our lives. Happiness is the conviction that I am going to do the right thing, and my belief is the right thing at these dark times, because quite frankly, it's the right thing to do. God bless and be well.